Welcome to Beat Diabetes. I'm Dennis Pollock, and today we're going to be talking about Ella Fitzgerald. I like jazz. I often will listen to it in the evenings or before I go to bed. I like Ella, and she did an album with Louis Armstrong that I especially like. So Ella Fitzgerald was a jazz singer along with other types of music that she sang. Ella had diabetes, and we can learn something from her life. So let's get started. A lot of what I got is from her website, the EllaFitzGerald.com website, and then also I picked up a few things from Wikipedia. But most of it's from her own website. Someone must be maintaining it. She's passed on now. But she was called the First Lady of Song, hugely popular. Most people today can't even imagine how popular she was back in the day, but she was a big star. She's called the most popular female jazz singer in the United States and was that for about half a century. So she was big in jazz music. She won 13 Grammy Awards, sold over 40 million albums. Wow, wow, wow. If anybody could be called a successful singer, she was. So she performed, it says from this website, she performed at top venues all over the world, packed them to the hilt. Her audiences were diverse with people from all types and colors and races and economic groups coming to see the famous Ella Fitzgerald. So how did Ella Fitzgerald get started in the singing business? Well, it's an interesting story there. When she was just 17 years old, she got picked by some random lottery to appear for amateur night at the famous Apollo Theater. So she showed up and was planning to do some dancing. She was kind of big into dancing, but the group before her, they were so good and just so outstanding in their dancing that she thought, I don't have a chance following these guys up. But she knew she could also sing a little bit. And so she asked the band if they could play the song Judy. I think it was Judy by Hoagy Carmichael. Yeah, Judy. And she did so well, and the people loved her so much. And it's interesting, when she got up, she was just 17, and she wasn't even sure what she was going to do. She was, like I said, she was about to start dancing, and then it's like, no, I can't do that. And she thought, well, do I sing? So she's debating. The people are booing her. The people are razzing her, telling her, do something. And finally, she asked the band if they could play Judy. And they could, and they did, and she sang, and she did so well, she just quieted the whole crowd. And suddenly they went from razzing her and not much caring for this young 17-year-old girl to loving her, and they begged her for an encore, and the rest, as they say, is history. She just had an incredible career. And one other interesting feature about her career, she got a big start. For a long time, she was playing in small jazz clubs. And finally, she got a chance to play in a very big jazz club. So it was called the Mocambo. Never heard of it. But anyway, that was a big nightclub at the time. And somehow Marilyn Monroe, believe it or not, took an interest in Ella Fitzgerald and just loved her. And Marilyn Monroe called up the owner or manager of the nightclub and said, I want you to have her sing. And if you'll have her sing, as long as she sings there, I'll be in the front row and I'll make an appearance every night and you'll get lots of publicity and people will come like crazy because by that time Marilyn Monroe was pretty big and famous. So the nightclub owner couldn't say no to that. And so they invited Ella Fitzgerald to sing. And she went from playing small jazz clubs to big nightclubs. And she was on TV and made all kinds of records. So she was huge. Well, that's not really the point of this, but I just want to let you know we're talking about a very, very famous singer and one of the most popular female singers that probably has ever lived in America, for sure. Okay, well, let's talk about her diabetes. She She ended up at the age of 76 having her legs amputated below the knee. And it's kind of interesting. I was thinking about the parallels between Ella Fitzgerald and my mom. My mom was no singer for sure, but they both had diabetes around the same time. They both died around the same time. Ella Fitzgerald lived to be 79. My mom lived to be 80. And you might suppose, well, hey, she made it a pretty long time for being a diabetic, almost turned to 80. But she had all kinds of problems for years. She had a coronary bypass surgery. She had a valve in her heart replaced. She had failing eyesight, and they said, well, that's the problem. You've got diabetes. She suffered at least one stroke, congestive heart disease, and respiratory problems as well. So she had a lot of issues. And she eventually had her legs amputated. She never fully recovered. She didn't even want to hardly get out. She probably performed a little bit, but not a whole lot after that. So basically, at the age of 76, she was no longer in full gear in terms of singing. She liked to sit out in the yard with her granddaughter, Alice, and she said, I like to listen to the birds and hear my granddaughter laugh and just enjoy the air. But the stage was no longer a big thing for her. Most of her work had been done before that. So you can easily go back 10 years and find that she was having all kinds of health issues in 86. She died in 96. And probably she had some issues before then, but at least for the last 10 years of her life, she had a lot of health issues and health problems. Her career was cut short, and eventually she died at the age of 79. My mom died at 80. You might look at them and say, well, they made it pretty far. A lot of people don't live that long, and they may not even be diabetic, yet they die in their 60s or early 70s, and Ella lived to be 79. But at least for 10 years, it was not a quality life that she experienced. It was rough, and she was in and out of the hospital having different problems and crises and emergencies. And finally, she passed away. So you say, yeah, well, that was a lady that lived some time ago, and I don't know how she relates to me, but she does. You know, some people will say, well, you're telling me I should cut this out and cut that out, and I shouldn't eat starches, and I shouldn't eat sugar. I need to eat a low-carbohydrate diet focused mostly on meat and salads and low-carb vegetables with some high-fat dairy like cheese and butter. And they're like, I'd rather just eat the regular standard diet, eat whatever I want, as much as I want, eat all the junk food I want. And if it's just going to knock off a few years, I can live with that. Well, I might agree with you if that's all diabetes did was just knock off a few years. If, for example, I thought that I could just eat anything I want and have the perfect dentist diet of eating everything that appeals to me, and it would only knock off 3 years, I might think, well, it might be worth it. But chances are it'll knock off more than that. But more importantly, not only will your life be shortened, probably, but you'll go through all kinds of pains and sufferings and hospital visits and issues. And I know that from my own mother. She for the last 15 years of her life, again, she lived to be 80. But from 65 onward, she was averaging one hospital visit per year for all those last 15 years. Some years it might be none, some years it might be 2, but it averaged out about 1 trip to the hospital per year. Some cases it was a big, big deal, like when she had her legs amputated. And she had other things, procedures, angioplasty, vein transplants, and just all kinds of things. So it wasn't just that her life got cut short and she maybe could have lived to be 84 instead of dying at 80. But her quality of life wasn't good, and often she faced depression. My mom was not a depressed kind of a woman. She was a very positive, cheerful person, had a great personality. Everybody liked her. But oddly, I mean, I guess it's not really odd, but it was different from the mom that I knew. She got depressed in her latter years at times. Now, she recovered, and by the end of her life, she was kind of going full strength in her personality, not in her health for sure. But she cried at times. And Linda told me that when they first set her up for the false leg, the first one, the second one, they didn't even try to do that anymore. But for the first amputation, they set her up and fitted her for a prosthetic. And when she got it, Linda said, my sister, she cried pretty much all night. It was just a shock to see that false leg, that prosthetic, and know that that would have to do her. But it didn't have to do her too long, because within 2 years she had another amputation. And at that point, they said, well, there's no point in you wearing prosthetics anymore. You'll just have to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. So it was not a good life. So don't listen to people that say, well, I'd just rather eat whatever I want to eat and lose a couple of years off my life. It's not that simple. And Ella, my mom, and many other diabetics demonstrate diabetes is a monster. It can ruin the last 10, 15 years of your life. So let me ask you this. What would it be worth to you to have the last couple of decades of your life healthy, where you're not in and out of hospitals, you're not going through all kinds of procedures, and you're not crying out of sadness over the loss of what you normally took for granted, your legs? How much would it be worth? Would you pay $100 if you could have 20 of the last 20 years of your life healthy? And you say, well, of course, everybody would. Would you pay $1,000? Would you pay $10,000 if you had it? Many don't have it, but if you did have it, and someone said, well, if you can give me $10,000, I can guarantee you'll have no health issues and you'll finally die after being sick only a couple of weeks, and that'll be the end. And it's worth the price. If it only cost $100, I'd pay $100. If it cost $1,000, I'd pay $1,000. Whatever it would cost. And we can make it more likely. There's no guarantee, of course, but it's more likely you'll experience those last good years if you go to a low carbohydrate diet, because you're being poisoned by carbohydrates, by all the chips and all the bread and all the starchy foods and all the candy and cakes and pies and Little Debbie treats and all the other junk that we eat. You're being poisoned. You're poisoning yourself. I mean, that's not really right to say you're being poisoned. You're poisoning yourself with all that junk. And you're creating 10 or 15 lousy years. You're making it likely that your last 10 or 15 years are going to be terrible. Ella Fitzgerald, it was that way. With my mom, it was that way. I think of Dr. Bernstein. He was doing good right up until the last month or so. As far as I know, it wasn't long, because he was fully functional in the early part of this year, and then he passed. So you should be encouraged. I mean, this has been kind of a gloomy story to tell, but the encouraging thing is it doesn't have to be that way. Ella Fitzgerald didn't know any better. My mom didn't know any better. There was no YouTube in those days. There were very few books coming out about the low carbohydrate diet and the dangers of metabolic syndrome, the dangers of constantly elevated insulin and constantly elevated glucose. Nobody was talking about it then, hardly. There were a few. Michael and Mary Eads came out with a book, Protein Power, I think around 96. But when they were going through it, there just wasn't any information available. It's there now. And you're listening to a part of it on this YouTube channel, but I am by no means the only one saying these things. It's becoming a drumbeat all over the nutritional land. And you would be wise to consider the last 15 years of your life and plan to make those, as much as you possibly can, by the grace of God, plan to make those good years and not years of suffering and depression and misery. If you've recently been diagnosed with diabetes and you've just discovered this channel, let me recommend that you go to our Uploads page, which will give you access to every diabetic video we've posted since we began. As you work your way through all our videos, I believe you'll find the help you need. A link to our uploads page is in the description.